Cancer. This is Jack Brook from Columbia Gorge Community College, and what I'd like to do in this session is talk about nutrition's relationship to cancer, looking at initiators, promoters, and anti-promoters, and how they relate to our increased risk of cancer. Just looking at some cancer facts, the top graphic deals with males. Got this again from the CDC in 2006 data, but you can see that prostate cancer is the highest cancer in males, then down lung cancer and colorectal and so forth. In females, it's breast cancer. But if you look at overall cancers, if you look at both of them kind of collectively, you'll basically see that lung and cancers and colorectal cancers are the most, in both groups, are the highest percentages of all. So there are some nutrition relationships to cancer. So what I want to do is specifically look at how nutrition plays a role in increasing and or decreasing risk of tumor growth. Costs nationally $89 billion per year. This was 2004. So by 2010, you can expect that to be upwards of, in the 90 billion range, or maybe even 100 billion range. This is the latest statistics I could get. Looking at cancer, basically those of you who have had cell biology and have studied mitosis will understand that cancer is abnormal mitosis. Usually when cells go through cell division with mitosis, they're highly regulated, meaning that cells are told by having a growth regulator fit into a receptor embedded into the plasma membrane, and that regulator would be like a hormone that would basically tell the cell it's time to divide. Well, cancer cells have lost that ability to be regulated, and so they pretty much are hyperactive, self-regulating, and they divide without reason. Another term you may hear is a neoplasm, and a neoplasm is an abnormal growth of cells for no purpose. They have no reason for growing rapidly or anything like that. But so a cancer cell would be an abnormal cell divided without control. Now, true cancer would be a cell that spreads. So there are two types of tumors. A benign tumor would be one that is not considered cancerous because it does not spread. It does not cause secondary tumors to result into other parts of your body. It's pretty much isolated to wherever the abnormal growth is occurring. And a malignant tumor would be one that is cancerous. It's invasive and actually can spread to other parts of the body. So if we look at this picture, you can see that a benign tumor, the first one on the left, has a capsule around it, and so it will get bigger, it will become obstructive, and can, if you have a benign brain tumor, it could possibly press the brain up against the skull. It can cause headaches. They're not necessarily round. They can have appendages, so kind of spider webby kind of thing. So they can be difficult to remove, but if you can remove a benign tumor and get it all, it won't come back, and you won't see tumors developing in other parts of your body. Now, a cancerous neoplasm or a cancerous tumor, as you see, does not have a capsule around it, and so individual cells have the ability to break off and go into the lymphatic system or the blood system and go to other parts of your body. This diagram kind of illustrates that. The diagram on the left here is a benign tumor, and so it just kind of grows in one area. But you notice on the right hand side you have a cancerous tumor, malignant tumor, and you can see here's the blood vessel, and you can see individual cells are broken off and they get into the blood vessel, and they can go to other parts of the body. And one of the issues with uh, malignant tumors, or when they metastasize. So metastasis is the ability of those cells to break off and go into the either the lymphatic system or blood system and go to other parts of your body. So these cells will then be able to establish in tissue. They have an ability called diapedesis, which allows them to go from the bloodstream through the blood vessel wall and establish in tissue. And then they can start their own tumor at that point, whether it be, in the kidney, in the lungs, or wherever, and that would cause secondary tumors or multiple tumors in different areas. And so that's a spreading cancer, which would be malignant. Um, so that would be malignant tumors, be the ones you'd want to catch really early and do that. So there are two different types of tumors, or benign and malignant tumors. And malignant are the one that you really want to catch early. Both are problems, but malignant are more long-term issue problems with secondary tumors and stuff that can reoccur over time. So the basic premise for development of a tumor is, first of all, the exposure to a carcinogen. So a carcinogen is anything that is going to be able to damage the DNA in such a way that uh, the mitosis genes are going to be altered in such a way that they are going to have cause abnormal cell division, increased cell division for no reason. And so the carcinogen obviously is going to have to penetrate through the plasma membrane or somehow get into the cell and then get to the DNA, which is in the nucleus of the cell, and do its damage there. Most cancers, you have more than one gene that is going to cause a problem with DNA. And so it could be a proto-oncogene, which encourages cell division. It could be a tumor suppressor gene that is supposed to stop cell division. So you can have abnormal increase of cell division or decrease the ability to stop cell division, kind of thing. So, but you first have to have exposure. The carcinogen has to get into the cell. You have to cause enough damage to the DNA, and specifically the genes that deal with cell division, to initiate the neoplasm. And then you would have enhancement by promoters. And we'll talk about promoters in a second. And this is where nutrition comes in. Nutrition, you don't normally relate nutrition to initiation or things that are in food that would initiate tumors. I mean, there are possibilities, but normally you think of nutrition's relationship to being a promoter of cancer growth, or and on the other end would be an anti-promoter that would decrease cancer growth. But once you initiate the neoplasm, and then the promoters would encourage cell growth, and then you get a full-blown tumor. Um, Whether it's benign or malignant is, a different story. What is the causes? I mean, there's multiple things that can cause cancer. As you grow older and you're exposed to different things, your DNA gets damaged. There's a potential, and as you know, older individuals are the highest percentage of cancer. Tobacco smoke, you're breathing in tobacco smoke, and I believe it's the benzopyrenes that are going to damage one of the tumor suppressors that is referred to as P53, and that is going to reduce the ability of the cell to regulate cell damage. Sunlight, the ultraviolet light, for skin cancer, radiation, getting x-rays and things like that. Chemicals like asbestos, some viruses can cause some issues. So there's different things that can develop, and result in cancer. But a poor diet and that kind of thing mostly deal with cancer in the range of being a promoter, not an initiator kind of thing. Here's the new symbol, came out about 2007, dealing with cancer prevention. So as we go through, I'm going to state some information from the American Institute of Cancer Research, AICR, and these are kind of the newer developments since 2007. They came out with a report on that. So most of my information comes from there, and you can access that report online if you want. Just go AICR and then look at their information. I wanted to give some definitions first. Number one, an initiator is anything that will cause damage to the DNA. And so that would be, again, like UV light or asbestos or some type of a carcinogen that is going to do that. A promoter is anything that's going to cause the tumors to grow. Promoters do not initiate tumors. The tumors already exist, and then they either are going to cause them or stimulate them to grow faster, or they're going to create an environment that allows initiators easier access to the nucleus. So it could be a potential of changing the plasma membrane, potentially, that kind of thing. So it would encourage initiation that way, but it doesn't initiate the tumors. It just makes it easier to initiate. And an anti-promoter is going to inhibit promoters. They're going to decrease the possibility of promoting a tumor. So looking at ICR recommendations, now these that I'm going to present deal mostly with nutrition related things. The AICR has other recommendations that are not nutrition related, and so I'm just focusing on the nutrition relationships here. So body fatness, their recommendations be as lean as possible, and then we've in an earlier session on obesity we talked about BMI. And so they make a recommendation there. The risk of body fatness is a promoter, especially the visceral fat for women is going to increase estrogen production, and there is a relationship to body fatness and the 3 cancers I have listed there. And so obese individuals have a higher percentage of these cancer types, mainly having to do with estrogen production. The more estrogen produced, the more the ability of estrogen to be a promoter as it binds onto, especially in breast and endometrial, binds onto estrogen receptors. And one of estrogen's roles to increase cell growth. And so if you have excess estrogen, then it can increase that risk that more receptors will be accessed and more communication to the cells to grow faster and faster will be encouraged. My information that I've read is that obese women produce 3 times more estrogen than a woman who is not obese. So decreasing fatness will decrease the promotion of the cancer. Now, it has nothing to do with initiation. It has to do with the speed of the tumor growth. Food and drinks, their recommendation: avoid sugary drinks and energy-dense foods. So our goal is to reduce processed foods that are high in sugar and fat. Okay, the reason is that they're promoters. Number one, they're going to promote overweight and obesity, and we just discussed that problem. because overweight and obesity, as a promoter, what that means, it increases estrogen. Therefore, it's helping to increase the risk of cancer. And then high fat intake has also shown to increase estrogen production. And so the more fat food that you eat, the more fat that you eat seems to increase estrogen. And we just talked about that problem. The other one is bile production. If you haven't had any anatomy, what you'll know is that bile is produced by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and is excreted into the duodenum of the small intestines to help emulsify fat that is eaten. And by emulsification, what we mean is to break it down into smaller pieces, because if you think about it, bile is basically made from cholesterol, so it's not really water soluble. But it does have two ends. One's water soluble and one is fat soluble. And as you know, it does not dissolve in water, so fat will kind of be floating on top of what we're going to call the chyme. So in the stomach, you have a mixture of all the chemicals and the water and stuff. We call that chyme. So the chyme will go into the duodenum from the stomach, and basically the fat will be, in essence, floating, and it makes it very, very difficult to digest by the lipase enzymes that are in the small intestines. So what the bile does is it breaks that fat layer down into small kind of emulsifying pieces, so it allows it to mix with the chyme, the water, makes it easier access for the lipase enzymes, and so we can more efficiently break down our mainly the triglycerides. The bile that's produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder, secreted into the duodenum, is called primary bile, and one of its other jobs is to create a mycel that is going to allow the digested fatty acid. The triglycerides are broken down into glycerol and fatty acids, and then you have fat soluble vitamins, and you have cholesterol and things that really don't mix well with water, and so they need some kind of a vehicle to transport them to the lining of the small intestines, to the cells, and make contact with those intestinal cells so they can be absorbed into the cell and then eventually into your body. And so a lot of that bile is not reabsorbed back into the body. Some is, but some is not. And so there's a certain amount that gets into the large intestines where bacteria can munch on it, and that they will create what's called secondary bile. And secondary bile has been considered a promoter for colorectal cancers. So the idea would be the more fat that you eat, the more bile, the primary bile, you have to use and produce, therefore increasing the amount of secondary bile. And so a higher level of secondary bile then would increase the risk of mainly colorectal cancers. But there also seems to be a relationship potentially, with not necessarily with bile, but with breast cancer and stuff, with the increased estrogen and things. I was kind of getting ahead of myself here. So the bile issue would be mostly colorectal type of cancers. So by reducing your fat intake, you can reduce the amount of estrogen, you can reduce the amount of bile produced, and then decrease the risk. And then by decreasing sugary and fat or energy dense foods, you can decrease weight and then stop that promotion. Animal foods, the AIC recommendation is to limit red meat and processed meats, no more than 18 ounces per week. So you kind of have to divide that down. That's not very much. That's like less than 3 ounces per day of red meat. And there's some individuals, some consumers who eat lots of hamburgers and different things and eat lots of red meat, a lot more than they may even eat 18 ounces in a sitting. So you need to encourage, a lot more white meats, chickens and things, fish, that kind of thing, as opposed to red meats. They've been, they are considered, red meats are considered promoters. Heme iron, there's two types of iron. There's the iron you get from plants, which like spinach, Popeye and all that, is non-heme iron. And it's a ferric type of iron. And then there's heme iron, which is ferrous type of iron. And a lot of heme iron, there is evidence that it does damage the lining of the colon, which again, if you damage the lining of the colon, then that would encourage, not initiate, but that would encourage the possibility of initiation of a cancer. So that's a promoter. You may have heard about barbecuing, but smoked meats, so that would be like smoked turkeys and stuff. The smoke can leave heterocyclic amines on the meat, and those have been considered promoters also. And the barbecued foods, especially the charred part of the meat, which a lot of you may like, is that burnt part, have polycyclic hydrocarbons that also be considered promoters. And so it depends, though, on how much you actually eat. I mean, how much smoked meat do you eat? If you only have a smoked turkey for Thanksgiving and that's all, it's not going to be a problem. If you only barbecue, during the summer, and maybe only once a week, that's not going to be a problem. But it's individuals who eat a lot of smoked product, a lot of barbecue. They barbecue every night, kind of thing, and they char their meat. Or the other thing that can cause the polycyclic hydrocarbons is when the fat of the meat drops onto the coals or the fire, and then burns, and then the smoke from that fat comes up. That will be polycyclic hydrocarbons, and they can be incorporated into the meat that way. And so the cancer types that are most often affected would be colon cancer with the red meats. So we need to be careful with not only red meats, but the way that we process or cook those meats. Preserved foods, especially salty foods, sodium processed foods. Risk factor is that salt damages the stomach lining, and so that can be a promoter for allowing cancer to be initiated. This has been pretty evident in cultures that eat a lot of salty, sodium-based foods, like in Japan or China, some places where they use a lot of like soy sauce and monosodium glutamate and those kinds of things that are pretty salty, see an increased risk of stomach cancer. So we need to make sure we limit those salty and processed foods to eliminate that risk. Alcoholic drinks, drinks can damage DNA, so they would be considered an initiator potentially. So it's not really, alcoholic drinks aren't necessarily nutritional, but I guess they can be if you have orange juice. But the key is they can be an initiator, which you don't want to do. And so there's lots of cancer types that are related to alcohol. So we need to make sure we limit the amount of alcohol that we drink. Plant foods, we need to eat more and more plants. We need 2/3 of your plate to be some type of a plant food, because they are anti-promoters. So an anti-promoter is something that inhibits the ability of a promoter. So fiber, the reason here we just talked about bile, secondary bile in the intestinal tract, or the other issue is the longer your wastes stay in the large intestines, the colorectal area, the increased risk that the bacteria fermenting, producing byproducts can increase the promotion of cancer. So we want to get our waste out of our colorectal area as fast as possible. So fiber, especially insoluble fiber, is going to be important in increasing gut transit time. So fiber in this case would be considered an anti-promoter. Phytochemicals that can protect oxidation, things that would oxidize, they can actually help prevent initiation also because of their ability to protect against some carcinogens. And also oxidation can cause cell damage to the plasma membrane that can increase potential for carcinogens to get through that barrier and get to the DNA. And they also strengthen our immune system and that kind of thing. So phytochemicals, which you can only get in plants, are very important. Vitamins and minerals that are antioxidants, enhance the immune system. So all of these would encourage the anti-promotion and decrease the ability to promote cancers. Even there are promoters that are a result of normal metabolism. They don't come from anything that we do nutritionally, but I think our bodies were set up that the phytochemicals and things we get from plants would deal with that metabolic activity that's normal. It's just that they're causing some problems because we have not been eating enough plant foods to deal with what they should be there to do. The other thing I might mention is trans fatty acids. And trans fatty acids, one of the things that are a potential, being a promoter, is that trans fatty acids are a different structure than regular fatty acids. Even though they're close to a saturated fat, they're a little bit different structure, and they can become part of your plasma membrane, which can change the barrier properties of that plasma membrane, and therefore it would increase the potential that a carcinogen could get in there. So it's not really related to this plant food section, but I just that thought came to my mind that one reason to decrease your trans fatty acids also is the potential that it could increase risk for cancer. Physical activity, again, we need to at least get 30 minutes a day, and then aim for higher amounts there. And it could be considered an anti-promoter because it's going to strengthen your immune system. It's going to just make your cells a little bit more active and have the ability to resist initiators, and your immune system is going to be able to resist carcinogens and some promoters and different things like that. So physical activity is an extremely important part to reducing the risk for cancer. So this is cancer, and this is some nutritional aspects plus the physical activity that you really need to take to heart, and make sure that you take those recommendations and decrease promoters, increase anti-promoters, and do everything you can to reduce the possibility of initiation with a not being out in the sun too much, and not drinking alcohol and those kinds of things. So hopefully this has helped you to help as a consumer, to help you make better decisions about your nutritional intake. Some of the references that you can access, some of the reports that I just went over at these websites, and so I'd encourage you to look at those and get better acquainted with how you can reduce